Hello and welcome back to the Hydrocarbon Engineering Podcast. Today's episode is focusing on drones, which are rapidly moving from novelty to a key tool in the tank storage sector, offering new ways to improve safety, efficiency, and data insight. But what does real-world adoption look like? And where is the technology delivering the most value today? In this episode, we're joined by Cruz, Vice President of Government Affairs at the International Liquid Terminals Association, to explore how drone technology is reshaping terminal operations.
This episode of the Hydrocarbon Engineering Podcast is sponsored by Sherwin-Williams Protective & Marine. Sherwin-Williams Protective & Marine delivers world-class industry subject matter expertise, unparalleled technical and specification service, and unmatched regional commercial team support to customers around the globe, including in the energy market. The company's broad portfolio of high-performance coatings and systems, including protected liquid and powder coatings as well as fire protection coatings, excel at combating corrosion and help customers achieve smarter, time-tested asset protection. For more information, visit protective.sherwin.com.
Hi Jay, welcome back to the Hydrocarbon Engineering Podcast. Can we kick off with some brief introductions? Can you tell us a little bit about ILTA and your role at the association, please?
Absolutely. My name is Cruz. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for ILTA. I've been with the association now for a little over 5 years. And in that role, I lead the association's legislative and regulatory advocacy here in Washington, D.C. ILTA is the trade association dedicated to companies that handle and operate terminal facilities, which store bulk liquid products like oil and gas products, chemicals, asphalt, biofuels like ethanol, jet fuel, some food products like molasses and olive oil. And I also oversee ILTA's Joint Committee, which is a working group, industry-wide working group of professionals across the specific focuses of environment, government, health, safety, and security, regulatory actualization within their companies. And within that working group, ILTA develops all forms of regulatory comments and formulates our advocacy strategy. We have a very bottom-up approach to collaboration and advocacy here in ILTA.
Great, thanks for that, Jay. So we've got you on the podcast today to talk about drones and their evolving use in terminals. And I noticed back in 2024, you highlighted the growing role of drones in terminal operations in a blog that you wrote, the ILTA's website. So how would you characterize adoption today? Are we now past the trial phase? Has much changed since your original blog?
I would say we are absolutely past the trial phase at this point. There are a number of companies, both within the ILTA membership and out and without, that are using drones in their day-to-day operations. I mentioned I wrote an article back in 2024. There was another article on, I think it was Yahoo Finance in 2025, on the wider oil and gas industry and its use of drones. Companies are using this new technology to improve their operations, their facility security, bolster their inspection requirements for their facilities. We even, at our most recent Joint Committee meeting in Tulsa, Oklahoma, were treated to a demonstration from one of our members, One Oak, showing off their drone capabilities. They use manned drone systems to go around their facilities, and highlight areas where personnel would normally be more at risk than they were to walk on the ground, up high over their tank farms, to do the inspections on behalf of their staff, they're better securing their personnel. There's still, of course, the reality that drones and maintaining a fleet can be expensive, the technology to use them. So that really does put a bit of a financial burden on what would be a smaller terminal company. There are also regulatory requirements that companies need to maintain in order to operate drones at their facilities, all sorts of permits through the FAA. And of course, as I mentioned, the cost to just have the systems in place, the IT and OT infrastructure needed to use them long term. But I think over time, that's only going to get cheaper, and you'll start to see more and more autonomous systems deployed across the country, not just in the terminals industry, but across the energy sector.
And has much else changed, Jay? I'm thinking specifically about rapid advances in AI since your original piece that you wrote. What would you say has been the significant developments in recent years?
I absolutely think that AI is at the forefront. There's going to continue to be at the forefront of all of this. Rapid advances in AI have resulted in autonomous drones and other vehicles, not just drones. You have trucks and other forms of transportation that are looking at becoming autonomous. And that comes down to both the transportation and the storage of hazardous materials that the energy sector normally handles. On the other end of that, seeing AI be used more and more in cybersecurity attacks, digital infiltration of any sort of entity. That is especially concerning for our industry because, again, we handle so many chemicals of interest and hazardous materials that we need to properly secure in order to keep the communities that they operate in safe. So working with federal partners, state and local partners to ensure that there's proper communication up and down the local chain of command to the terminal company is incredibly important because, again, the cybersecurity requirement for terminals is only going to get higher and higher.
So you also mentioned in your blog that the primary benefit of drones is to improve overall security and safety in facilities. Would you say that's still the case? And can you give us some practical examples of how drones can be implemented in this way?
Yeah, sure. I still think security is going to be at the forefront. General monitoring of the facility's perimeter, I'm sure that we detect any sort of activity detected on cameras or whatever. Companies can quickly deploy drones to provide a bird's eye view of what is happening. You also have leak detection and repair operations, or LDAR for short, emissions monitoring through optical gas imaging cameras. Companies are able to take more detailed maps of their facilities, monthly, quarterly, however long they want. They can send drones to take high-resolution composite images of their facilities that they can use to monitor to make sure that nothing untoward is happening. There's a new regulation, a big conversation right now happening within the FAA around beyond visual line of sight operations and inspections. So deploying drones beyond where you're able to visibly see them, the operator's able to visibly see them. If a facility is 2 miles wide by 2 miles long, a company can deploy a drone from one corner of a facility to the other without having to be able to see it, which currently requires permits from the FAA to do. But again, as the technology improves, you're going to see that become implemented more and more.
Thanks for that, Jay. And I want to come back to what you were just talking about there in terms of the beyond visual line of sight operations a little bit later. But I was also wondering if there are any areas where drones are delivering unexpected value in the tank storage industry.
Unexpected value, that's a tough one. I think that the biggest benefit in all of this, again, is removing the terminal operator from having to go up high in order to inspect a tank, preventing any sort of slip from happening, any sort of fall risk, or sending a drone inside of a tank itself to do imaging inside of a tank so that operators don't have to don all the proper PPE, protective equipment to go in and put themselves where those hazardous materials are stored. There's plenty of benefit to be drawn from drones and other autonomous technologies, but it's just important to make sure that the IT and OT systems in your company are properly prepared to handle the load of maintaining those systems.
And do you see drones becoming part of a fully autonomous inspection ecosystem alongside the likes of robotics and fixed sensors?
I do. I don't know when that day will come, but I do think it's definitely on the horizon somewhere. Drones certainly have their place in operations at any facility as long as the proper security and cybersecurity measures are in place. We've certainly heard of the upsides, but it will be important that the decision remains with terminal operators to decide if and how they choose to implement this technology. Training for drone operations and inputting these drones into a company's IT and OT infrastructure are important cost considerations for any sort of organization to balance.
And of course, Jay, the flip side of all of these benefits is that drones do present a threat to facilities, which could undermine safety and security. So can you talk us through the potential concerns and some of the steps that terminal operators are making to address this?
Absolutely. I think that the most immediate example is an outside actor. Anyone, even just a hobbyist to someone who has ill intentions, can deploy a drone at a facility, disrupting operations or harassing workers, or even using drones to attack a facility. There was an example back in 2020 in Pennsylvania where a drone was used or was going to be used to attack an electrical substation in the state there, which would have disrupted power for the region. We see drones being deployed in combat more and more today. There have been a couple of counter-drone actions taking place in El Paso, Texas, both of which caused closures to the El Paso airspace, and one of which involved numerous air flight cancellations. So the potential to harass and disrupt day-to-day operations at any facility is definitely there. Legally, right now, a terminal facility can't themselves shoot down a drone or deploy an active countermeasure to drones. All they can really do is report it up to state and local police, which will eventually make its way up to the Department of Homeland Security and the FAA. That is an area that the federal government and various state governments are looking at right now to give critical infrastructure operators the protections that they need to respond if they want to.
And have terminal operators changed their view on the risk of this, Jay, in light of the fact that there's been increasing attention on drones in critical infrastructure recently due to the geopolitical tensions and incidents involving drone surveillance?
I would say that this has reaffirmed our ongoing concern with the increased usage of drones. Not that there would be some large-scale attack on American energy infrastructure like we've seen in conflict areas, but it certainly displays the potential a single bad actor could have in causing damage to our facilities. It only takes one drone to crash into a substation, again, to cut power to an entire region, right? It only takes one drone to crash into a tank to cause a material spill at a facility. So the potential is definitely there. And I think it's critical for the federal and state governments to work with critical infrastructure operators like ours to ensure that local communities are protected, the nation's energy supply chain is protected, and everyone is on the same page with regard to what options they have to ensure the safety of everyone that lives and works at a facility.
So Jay, I want to turn back now to the big topic that you were talking about earlier in the US, where earlier this year, the Federal Aviation Administration reopened a comment period for the notice of proposed rulemaking that would normalize the use of unmanned aircraft systems, so i.e. drones, beyond visual line of sight operations. Now, this proposed change would have major implications for the sector. So can you talk us through the proposal? I mean, you mentioned it earlier briefly, but maybe you could just put a bit more meat on the bones. Tell us about the proposal, the potential implications, and where we're at with it right now.
If I recall correctly, it was part of the Federal Aviation Administration of the FAA's Reauthorization Act back in 2024. As part of that budget reauthorization, a provision was included requiring the publication of a notice of proposed rulemaking, which is essentially opening up a comment period for private industry or other public entities to provide a direct comment on a rule that an agency is going to put out. That NPRM was focusing on safe beyond visual line of sight drone operations in American airspace. Back in summer of last year, the Trump administration also published an executive order titled the Unleashing American Drone Dominance Executive Order, which among other things called for the FAA to release a BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight rulemaking within 30 days, and a final rule to be published by the end of this year. A couple of key changes from the proposed rulemaking. The goals were to increase the ability for package delivery. So there are a number of companies like Walmart and Amazon right now that want to send drones out to deliver packages, which sounds convenient. But of course, in order to do, drones have to travel far beyond the area where an individual operating the drone would be deploying it to deliver said package. But of course, for terminals, being able to operate a drone at their facility, across their facility, would help improve their inspection capabilities all the same. With the increase in drone flight, there is concern for the safety of critical infrastructure like bulk liquid terminals. Congress has passed legislation directing the FAA to create flight restricted zones around critical infrastructure, including bulk liquid terminal facilities, back in 2016. But unfortunately, the FAA has repeatedly failed to meet its statutory deadlines to publish said rule. At the moment, the original NPRM was open from early August to October, where FAA took feedback and comment from industry like ours, but we're waiting right now on that FAA rule from 2016 that was mandated, and ILTA is planning to be involved with the FAA developing that rule further and making sure that our industry is properly represented when it comes out.
So Jay, what's next? If we're having this conversation again in a couple of years, what would need to happen for you to say that drones have truly transformed terminal operations?
That's a great question. I think we'll just have to see. The cost and security considerations will be a big weight on any company thinking of implementing this technology into their operations. So as the technology becomes more accessible and companies have a better idea of how to secure it, I think that those will be the two biggest factors in whether or not a company is able to actually deploy and implement drones into their operations. Of course, what happens at the federal level with any sort of rulemaking will also impact how a company is able to utilize and protect themselves from drones. Right now, we're in a bit of a waiting game. There's the saying that legislation and regulation are always reactive rather than proactive, and drones are such a new technology that we don't quite know where it's going to go. AI is only getting better. Drones are only becoming smaller and more efficient. It's up to our federal partners to sort of lead the charge and allow industry to provide input where we can.
Great. Jay, really appreciate you joining us. It's been fascinating to hear how drones are evolving from a niche tool into something that is much more integrated across terminal operations. Thanks again for your time today. We really appreciate your insights.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
My thanks again to Jay from the ILTA for sharing his insights into how drone technology is maturing across the tank storage sector. As adoption accelerates and frameworks for their use continue to develop, it's clear that drones are set to play an increasingly important role in the future of our terminal operations. Thanks for listening to the Hydrocarbon Engineering Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with the latest conversations shaping the downstream sector. And we'll see you again next time.
This episode of the Hydrocarbon Engineering Podcast is sponsored by Sherwin-Williams Protective & Marine. Sherwin-Williams Protective & Marine delivers world-class industry subject matter expertise, unparalleled technical and specification service, and unmatched regional commercial team support to customers around the globe, including in the energy market. The company's broad portfolio of high-performance coatings and systems, including protective liquid and powder coatings as well as fire protection coatings, excel at combating corrosion and help customers achieve smarter, time-tested asset protection. For more information, visit protective.sherwin.com.